Second down and 10. Oh, what a hit. Look out. Brad Smith. My goodness. I'm not sure about this one.
In the United States every year, at least 2 million people are affected by traumatic brain injury, and at least 50,000 people die every year as a result. A concussion is a temporary and fully reversible loss of brain function caused by direct injury to the brain. It is a mild form of brain injury, usually resulting from minor trauma to the head. Contusions are localized areas of bruising on the brain tissue. They consist of areas of swollen brain and blood that has leaked out of small arteries, veins, or capillaries. Contusions will often occur under the impact point of the skull. The brain is subdivided into 4 main lobes: the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. The frontal lobe is an area in the brain positioned in front of the parietal lobe and on top of the temporal lobe. The frontal lobe is associated with reward, attention, short-term memory tasks, planning, and motivation. The parietal lobe is a part of the brain positioned above the occipital lobe and behind the frontal lobe. The parietal lobe integrates sensory information from your environment and is particularly important determining spatial sense and navigation. The occipital lobe is positioned at the back of the brain. This lobe is responsible for the vision processing center of the brain. The temporal lobe is the region of the brain located on the side and beneath the lateral fissure. Temporal lobes are involved in processing sensory input, comprehending language, storing new memories, emotion, and deriving meaning from things. Brain cells, or neurons, send over 100 billion messages to and from the body every day. Long nerve fibers, or axons, connect other neurons with each other throughout the brain. Dendrites branch off the body of the neurons and attach to the axons. After receiving a blow to the head, the brain hits the skull, causing a contusion, or otherwise known as a bruise. The rotational forces cause tearing at different areas of the brain, called diffuse axonal injury. The damaged axons caused by the shearing reduce normal brain function by interrupting communication between the neurons. In this video, we can see a model of floating microtubules of axons about to break apart. Vesicles containing proteins provide structural support for the neurons, and they are powered by motor proteins. After a blow to the head, these rotational forces cause a large amount of stress on the microtubules, causing them to break. When you have a concussion, the potassium normally in the cell exits the cell. When these ions leave the cell, it allows positively charged calcium ions to rapidly enter the cell and replace the potassium, but the calcium ions shut down the ATP pumps needed to pump the calcium out. This results in an energy crisis in the brain. At this stage, the affected neurons are still alive but do not function properly. The energy crisis is a likely mechanism for post-concussive vulnerability, making the brain less able to The influx of calcium builds in the mitochondria, causing oxidative dysfunction. Oxidative stress is an imbalance of ions within the cell that inhibits its ability to repair itself. Damaged mitochondria during a time when the neural cells need energy can have a devastating effect. Immediately following a traumatic brain injury, magnesium levels in the cell drop dramatically. Magnesium is used in the cell to aid ATP production and also protein synthesis. It is also used to maintain the cell membrane. Magnesium is also used to block NMDA receptors, therefore when Mg is reduced, NMDA sustained high levels of calcium within a cell can lead to many problems, such as activating certain enzymes, calpain-1, that actually degrade neural proteins in the brain. A second enzyme, phospholipase, is also activated that degrades the cell membranes. Calcium triggers the release of more glutamate and leads to more influx of more calcium and higher cell toxicity. Long exposure to calcium can trigger cell death through apoptosis. Apoptosis is the process of programmed cell death that may occur in multicellular organisms. Blood flow to the brain also declines after a traumatic brain injury. Vessels become restricted and lowers the amount of oxygen that can reach the brain. The increased need for energy results in rapid and inefficient glycolysis, but with the narrowed blood vessels, the need for glucose sometimes cannot be met. The inability to supply the affected areas of the brain with valuable nutrients is extremely hazardous. Eventually, the brain cells that do survive are able to restore homeostasis and are able to repair themselves. The recovery process for a concussion is a very long and slow process. Once cells are damaged and the connection has been lost, they don't heal back. Other areas of the brain must compensate. The brain shifts its focus and rewires itself to be able to perform. A lot of the times we must reteach the brain to establish these new connections.
Every year, over 100,000 concussions occur in all levels of football, and 60% of these are from head-to-head collisions. In an impact lasting just 15 milliseconds, a player's head, on average, experiences almost 100 Gs of force, and collisions on special teams can result in forces of up to 190 Gs. In the NFL, the average speed of a head-to-head impact, the velocity of both heads combined, is 20 miles per hour, with the struck player's head decelerating 14 miles per hour. According to studies done by Sports Science's chief medical advisor, Dr. Basil Aish, this 15 millisecond impact is equivalent to getting smashed in the head with a sledgehammer.
Junior Seau was a Pro Bowl linebacker in the NFL who passed away on May 2nd, 2012 at the age of 43 from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest. It was later found out by the National Institute of Health that Seau suffered from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a type of chronic brain damage that has been found in other deceased NFL players.